Video number 2, talking to a Marshal Vinod Patney. We were on the Kargil war and the use of Air Force therein. And you brought out that there were constraints, like the line of control was not to be crossed by the aircrafts and even the projectiles. And the other special feature was that the targets were quite tiny. Now my question precisely is that even for such limitations or factors, these would have been factored in the training missions earlier? Or were the pilots confronted with such a situation for the first time?
Every operational command has an operational plan as to what should be done in case of a war. And so did we in Western Air Command at that time. But as I mentioned, air power is like a predator. He must be given free reins. And our object was to be offensive in nature. Air power is essentially offensive in character. But here we were pushed to stay within our side. Also, air power can do that much better in case it can see and acquire the target. Acquire the target implies that you can see it sufficiently in advance to be able to aim effectively. But if the target is small, you can't do it. And as the war progressed, we found other means of being able to do it. But to begin with, it wasn't possible. So what did we do? We did the best we could. And here I must tell you this, that our thinking was that because the targets were so tiny, and believe me, that the army that was there on the ground, they found it very difficult to be able to see these targets themselves.
Yes.
And they would tell us that it is on this crest, it is along this ridge. And then we would try and spot it and see it. Any amount of reconnaissance missions did not help very much. Under these circumstances, we did something. We said that why not try helicopters? For two good reasons. One was helicopters are generally slower and they can come that much closer. And when they come that much closer, the chances are that they will be able to see better. And the second is the helicopters that we had at that moment, which could operate in this area, could be armed with 64 rockets. And all 64 could be fired in one pass. So which meant that we would then have a large area on the ground covered by rocket fire, which is very nice, isn't it? Because if the target is not very visible, then you have a spread which the 64 rockets would give you, and that would be that much to your advantage.
Yes.
But I forgot something that I had been preaching all my life. I didn't forget, but I put it aside. I had said all along in my life that a helicopter has no place in a hostile environment. And this was a hostile environment which we learned to our cost. To begin with, we did not think that Pakistan had any capability whatsoever. There was a case where in our reconnaissance missions, a Canberra was shot. And the Canberra was, the missile that hit the Canberra lodged itself in one of the engines. And the aircraft landed. 3 days later, the engine had been changed and it flew off. Normally, if there is a missile that goes into an engine, we would expect far greater damage. And this made us believe that actually the weakness of the Pakistani armed forces was there in a very big way, and we had no reason to fear. But when one of our helicopters got shot, and then one of our aircraft also was hit by a missile, we then recognized that they had more missiles than we had given them credit for.
That came as a surprise.
It came as a shock.
Okay.
So we did two things. One is that the helicopters were no longer used in an offensive role. They did sterling service as far as logistics and transportation and casualty evacuation and everything else is concerned. But they were not used in an offensive role from then onwards. And second thing that we did was that we said, all right, from now onwards, because they have these missiles, ground-to-air missiles, we will do all our flying and all our attacks 8,000 feet above target level. 8,000 feet is a good figure because that is the approximate height of the effectiveness of surface-to-air missiles. Even the shoulder-fired variety. And we followed this particular thing till such time as we got to a stage where there was that much more confidence that they were not doing anything at all. We allowed civil air traffic to start operating within about 4 or 5 days of the operations. Again, an indication of our confidence. And a little while later, we said why not use our better aircraft, which so far we had kept in the background.
Yes.
The reason here, which was hurting me and niggling me all this while, was that if we were to put our a really good aircraft like the Jaguars and the Mirages into combat, and one of these aircraft was to be shot down, it would be a public relations disaster. And it would be that much of a public relations, what should I say, to the advantage of Pakistan, public relations advantage. But when we felt that it was possible and we can use the ability of these aircraft to operate in this particular area, with some care, some doing, we started to bring them in, and from then onwards, I think the effectiveness of air power increased that much better.
Thank you. This brings us to the end of the second video, and the conversation with Air Marshal Patney would continue, and we would have more information on Kargil. Thank you.